Are you looking for an experience that will grow your teenagers' faith, increase their leadership skills, and teach them the discernment to engage with the world all around them, all while taking them on the adventure of a lifetime? I mean, who isn't looking for that? If your teenager loves fun, adventure, and wants to grow in their faith and leadership this summer, then send them to Excel's Summer Leadership Camp. Excel's Summer Leadership Camp is a 12-day experience for passionate young leaders looking to discover God's truth, to discern wisely, and live wholeheartedly. Your teenager will embark on a transformative journey in the Blue Ridge Mountains, where they'll build lasting friendships in the context of community, embark on thrilling adventures like camping, rock climbing, whitewater rafting, and they will receive expert training and certifications in categories like CPR and wilderness first aid. Each aspect of the camp is woven together to help them learn to discover truth, to discern wisely, and take godly action in the context of real-life situations. To learn more or begin an application, go to theexcelcamp.org. That's theexcelcamp.org. Hurry, because summer is just around the corner.
Hey friends, before we jump into this episode, could you do me a favor? Would you be willing to hop over to iTunes and leave a rating or review? We really are trying to get to 100 rating and reviews. Your help is critical. Thank you so much. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Reclamation Podcast, where our goal is to help you reclaim good practices for faith and life. I'm your host. My name is Tony, and today is episode 141 of the podcast, where I sit down with organizational expert Dana White. Dana runs a podcast and a book called A Slob Comes Clean, and her information is so useful for decluttering in everyday life. Now, I'm a guy that doesn't really like clutter. I like everything to be clean, but I have a family and 3 kids, and well, you know how that story goes. So I loved my conversation with Dana. We talked about organization. We talked about what it means to live out your faith in kind of a very intentional but quiet way. So a lot of good dialogue here just about her, about what she does, about what she stands for. I think you're absolutely going to love this conversation with Dana. Hey, and if you do love it, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. That way you make sure you don't miss any bonus episodes like the one we dropped last week with Eric Horseman. Now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Dana White. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have today author, speaker, podcaster extraordinaire, organizing for the rest of us, author Dana K. White. Dana, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me on. This is fun. I hope that I live in the country now. And so internet is an interesting thing I'm getting used to. Country internet, you know? I think you have to say internet in the country, right? Internet.
And throw in a y'all. Now, what part of the country are you located in?
I'm in Texas.
In Texas.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the Texas skies are so big, there should be internet everywhere there.
You know, it's funny. I mean, like, not to get off the subject already, but, having done this online thing for a long time, I've known so many people who are like, oh, I could do that anywhere. And then they try to do it anywhere and realize, oh, yeah, you can't do the internet anywhere because it really is not as accessible in certain places. But I do have good internet. I'm just kind of trying to figure out how to use it correctly here in the country. So
praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Well, I want to jump in. There's a word that's all over your blog and website that I really want to hear about, which is deslobification. And that's part of your brand. And I'm wondering if you could do 2 things for us. If you could talk a little bit about what deslobification means and talk about your calling into this ministry of online reality-based organization / life coaching almost.
So you want my life story?
Yeah, that's
okay. Fine. Yeah. So deslobification is a made up word that I made up because that's what I do. I make up words. And really the fact that I made up a word explains a lot. Like I always wanted to be a writer. So I was actually a theater arts teacher before I had kids and loved doing that job. But the schedule that involves didn't really go with what I wanted once I became a mom. You know, I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, the evenings and all that kind of stuff for theater. It just wasn't my thing. But I wanted to have a creative outlet. And so because that's just, as a creative, you know, it just burns inside of you. Like I'm not truly alive unless I have some sort of a creative outlet. Yeah, I mean, that's just how God
Right.
created me. And so anyway, I wanted to be a writer. Thought, okay, once my kids are older, I'll figure out how to kind of go about that. And then in 2009, I discovered blogs, and they were not new at that point, but new to me. And, the whole world didn't necessarily know about them like they now do.
Yeah.
Um, so I realized, oh, wow, like people are writing and people are reading it. And I saw people turning it into a business. And I thought, okay, this is the thing I need to do. Actually, I discovered that in 2008, but I didn't start writing because my house was a disaster. And it had been a struggle my entire life. Like I assumed once I became a mom and it was my focus that I would be successful at that, because that's generally how I would live life. I would like choose something that I was into, figure it out, and, do it, and I just thought, okay, well, once my house is my actual thing, then I'll have it under control. But it actually got harder once we had kids. And so I you know I didn't want to throw myself into this creative project when I still had not figured that out, the house stuff, because I thought, you know, I knew how I am with projects, and it was going to take my focus even more away from my house. And so I put it off, tried to get my house under control, prayed a lot. Okay, God, please, seriously, fix me. What is wrong with me? Why is this so hard for me? And then right before my middle child went to kindergarten, which he just turned 18, right before that, like it was the day before he went to kindergarten, I was actually in church and I was like, okay, God, why are I had like, it was burning in me to start writing. And yet I was putting that off because God wasn't answering my prayer to change me and make me organized.
Mm.
And, um, and that was when I felt like God just told me, which I mean, I know that's a whole conversation on its own, but like, it was like right about that, which would not have come from me. Like
Yeah.
this is literally the one thing that if you would have told me I would be writing about this as my career, I would have laughed in your face. I mean, it was the one thing I would have refused to write about, but I thought it was going to be a practice blog, like, so I could kind of go ahead and start learning about blogging while I got my house under control.
I mean, you
Every
even gave yourself a fake name, right?
Yeah. Oh, I didn't even tell my husband what I was doing. Like, and he knew. He knew that I was wanting to start writing. But I mean, I had tried so many times to get my house under control that I was like, well, this will probably fail too. I mean, that was just like, it just is. I didn't want anybody to know. I didn't want anybody to see, because I was completely, so I made it anonymous, which then helped me be completely honest, and I also, the name A Slob Comes Clean came to me at that moment. And I didn't want to call myself a slob. But once I did, I had nothing else to lose. I mean, like I'd already
Yeah.
said I was a slob. So why try to pretend anymore, like I had done my whole life, try to pretend, oh, it's just this, it's just that, it's whatever. So I started writing about it. And over time, I think it was I think I wrote something one time and I said something about the slobification, which is is it Tim Gunn? He's on Project Runway, and I am going to be so embarrassed if I said the wrong name, but anyway, because I love him. Anyway,
I have no idea.
but
So you're good.
this guy
Whatever you
on
think, I think.
this guy on Project Runway, the one that we all love so much, and it's been a long time since I've watched it, so I can't remember his name. But he said something about like loose clothing, and how that has contributed to the slobification of America, and that just like hit me. And anyway, so then I kind of switched it to deslobification. Like, this is my deslobification process. So that's the long version of how this came about. Yeah, like I just started writing about what I was doing and not doing, and figuring it out.
Well, I love the way that you intertwine practical, very practical, real life strategies and your own personal story. And now you've released several books now, and Organizing for the Rest of Us is the latest, and it's very, very practical, very strategy driven. There's all these different, I mean, really just short chapters, 100 of them, right? Like easy things to dive into. How do you know when it's time for you to create a new resource like this? How do you know it's like God calling you to this versus like, man, do I really want to write another book about my struggles? Because it feels so vulnerable.
It, that's a great question. So it all, I always wanted to be a writer. Like that was
Yeah.
the whole reason that I even started doing this was I wanted to be a writer. Um, the first book that I put out was like, I connected with an agent. And as my husband and I were talking about, I was like, am I going to sign? Because you sign with an agent. That sounds really like commitment, it's like, and before that, everything I had done had been like, okay, I'm doing this and I'm turning it into a business, but I could walk away at any moment. Like that's
Yeah.
because I was like, family, my kids were at an age where it was like family, not that family's not first now, but it was like, if they need me, all this stuff can go away. I'm just doing that. And so to sign with an agent felt like it was like, okay, what am I getting myself into? And but then we just looked at each other and we're like, wait a minute, this is the whole thing I've been wanting to do. This is the reason I started writing, not what I thought I was going to write about, but the whole reason I started writing on the blog was that I wanted to be a writer. And so it was like, why would I not do this? So we prayed about it and went with that. And then, I pitched the first book and they gave me a 2-book contract. So it was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm
Oh.
writing 2 books. So I wrote the 2 books. And then this one, I've actually, we kind of mentioned it right before we started recording, but, I had been working on a book about the Jesus side of everything, like about the spiritual side of that. I've been working on that for like, I think time is a weird thing these days with COVID. I mean, like I
Amen.
can't
Amen.
remember. I'm like, how
Well,
long has
it's
stuff been
obviously
going?
still 2020, right? 2019. Is it
Yes.
2019 still?
Yeah. I think I started working on that book in 2019.
Okay.
And so it was one where I was like, I'm not gonna get it under contract until I've written it. Cause I really, I was just like, I really needed to work it out, which was fun to me and exciting because the other 2 books have been like based on the stuff I'd been doing online for so long. So I was working on that book and I was literally almost done with it. And then the publisher basically just said, hey, do you want to write this book, Organizing for the Rest of Us? And it is like you said, it's short, strategy driven, so it's not the 60,000 words narrative kind of a thing like the other 2 books were. And I was like, okay, I think I can do that. And we prayed about it again because it was like, do I need, what? But I
Yeah.
see value in this one because it's a gift book. It's flip throughable. It's got pictures. And so I think it's going to reach people that wouldn't read the 60,000 words.
I mean, honestly, what I told my wife was, I was like, "Oh, I'm podcasting with Dana today. I'm super excited about it." I was like, her latest book, it reminds me of like a bathroom reading book. Like when you're
Yes.
hiding from your family and you're in the bathroom and you're like, I'm just going to read one chapter on, the importance, the magic that comes with hangers or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that's the way it feels to me. And it's super cute. I know it sounds weird just coming out of my mouth,
Cute.
but it's super cute, like.
Yeah, it is cute. Yeah, no, and one of the things, it's funny that my agent, a different agent now, but said when we were talking about this, I was like, okay, I've got this other book I've been working on. Do I do this one? And they were like, this book goes in a different section of the bookstore.
Yeah.
Like it reaches a different group of people. And it I feel like, okay, so is that gonna, I don't want to predict the future. I leave it all up to God. I have no idea. But if it reaches a different section of the bookstore and different group of readers, well, then, okay, maybe that's what God wanted to happen before the next book comes out, eventually. I don't know. It's, as a Christian, it's tough because you're like, I think God's doing this. Well, but it's not my job to predict what he's doing. It's my job to
Right.
say, okay,
Right.
what do you have for me right this second? And this was just one of those things that came up and it was like, I don't know how I don't do this book.
I love it.
Is that
Yeah.
not the answer you wanted, though?
No, that's perfect. That's perfect
Yeah.
because what I think it does show it is it shows your willingness to be obedient, regardless of what you thought the plan was, which I think a lot of us struggle with. Is like
Yeah.
one of the words that God's been giving me a lot lately is joyful obedience, and
Mhm.
I really hate it. But it's this idea about like, hey, I'm not in charge. God's in charge. I'm going to do whatever God says, and this feels like that necessary step. So I wanted to ask kind of just a question that piqued my curiosity. What did you think that you were going to be writing about
When before I
when
started any of this cleaning stuff?
before you started? If you go back to like young 20s Dana, and you're thinking about your writing career, are you a theater writer? Are you a fiction,
So
romance?
no, not romance. I if you look at my stuff and see how realistic I am, you
Yeah.
can probably go, okay, well, yeah, she's not a romance. You know what I mean? Because I'm always like, I don't. Anyway, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bash romance. Romance
No,
is
it's
great,
fine.
but it okay. So it's funny because like, what did I think I was going to write? Well, when I was a theater arts teacher, I was like, I could write plays.
Yeah.
I would get these little, they come in booklets and stuff, and it's plays that are kind of, perfect for your junior high or your classes to do or whatever. And I was like, I could write these, and then I was a stay-at-home mom and I would read Family Fun magazine. This was back before the internet was such a big deal. And I was like, I could write that. What I mean? So, one of my big ideas I had was I wanted to write like, conversations for couples and stuff. So even though I prefer to read fiction,
Yeah.
every idea that I ever came up with was nonfiction. And so, what I wanted to write about, what I wanted to start blogging about was this thing that, nobody's ever written about: motherhood. I'm sorry. I mean, like, but this is in the beginning before,
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
that anyway. I'm so thankful I didn't write about motherhood. Oh my goodness. I mean, like, parenting, that would be the hardest thing to write about. I mean, anyway. So
Oh, you would do fine. You would do fine. I'm confident of
no,
it.
I have older kids now. So I'm like, yeah, everything I've ever thought I knew was wrong. So I'm glad
How
I
old are
didn't
your
write it
kids?
down. I have one who's about to be 20, one who's 18, and a daughter who's 15. So yeah.
Do you have any tips? So I'm just a little bit behind you. I've got an almost 16-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old princess. Two boys and a princess.
That's awesome.
Um,
Yeah.
any tips? Any tips for the rest of us?
Um, whatever you thought you knew, just get ready to not know it anymore. That's sorry.
Praise the
No,
Lord.
I mean, I will say that, I think I have maybe 16 years left. At one point, as my kids were kind of probably younger even than yours are, I went, you know what? I'm not going to give parenting advice for the next 20 years. I'm going to wait and see how this all turns out. So, I, I and I'm glad for that. I mean, like I, I'm not their Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
and if I actually trust God, then I have to trust him to work directly in the lives of my children.
Yeah.
And because he worked directly in my life, and it
Sure.
didn't look anything like my mom assumed it would look, or what she would have arranged. If she was the author of that, she would have had it go a certain way, and that's not how it went. And yet I'm so thankful for all that God has done in my life and continues to do. And so I have to trust that he's doing that in my kid's life. And I say I have to trust, but it's hard. It's the hardest thing I've ever done to let go, because I want
Yeah.
to do things that I can control and I want to hold on. And it's like, no, I've got to let God do it.
Yeah. One of the things that we say around here a lot is that if you're not dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, what are some of the things that you do on a regular basis to give up trust and control? Not just for your kids, but also obviously you've got an online business, and you don't get to control how people receive that. You don't get to control the comments and all of the sections of all the content you're putting out there.
what do you do on a daily basis to connect with God and say, okay, not my will, but your will be done?
You know, it's the easiest answer, and that is literally being in scripture every day.
Hmm.
I mean, and I say that as someone who was a Christian from childhood and went to church, went to Bible studies, read here and there, but I, it was not until I actually started doing daily Bible study, which I go to Bible Study Fellowship, BSF, which I don't know
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
know. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But um which they're not near as strict as they used to be. So a lot of people know of them as being like so strict. They're not like that as much anymore. But I went scared to death thinking that I was going for my kids to be in the kids program, thinking I was going to, because I didn't think I could do it. I didn't think I could do something that, was every single day. And yet it literally changed my life, changed my heart,
Mhm.
changed my soul, changed everything about the way I think. And I've, and knowing that, especially as somebody who, if somebody's read my stuff, they know that I overthink. Like, and God uses that. I mean, He uses it
Sure.
because He gives me however many, probably 200,000 words I've written now, at least in books, not counting the everything else I do. But like words about these things that need, some people need to have rehashed and thought about in a different way and all that kind of stuff. And yet the thing I have to do as I'm in scripture is to remember I am not the one in control. And
Yeah.
the understanding, the figuring it out, that is all actually a matter of me releasing control to the Holy Spirit. And that is hard. Um, but yeah.
I love that. And one of the reasons I love to ask that question is because I want all of us to just be reminded that the easiest, obvious answer is the place to start. And almost everyone says scripture, and yet for so many of us, it's hard to pick up the scripture and just get started. So I love that gentle nudge. One of the things I appreciate about your platform is what I affectionately call sneaky Jesus. And it's not, you're not overtly Christian. You're clearly a woman of faith. And if you dig around enough, you'll find little spots here and there. I'm kind of curious if you could take us a little bit behind the curtain on how you position your faith in light of your platform. And then it sounds like you're making a step in a different direction. What prompted that as well? So if we could go both ways.
Yeah. So, I started this deslobification process, writing about it. And I totally assumed that at some point God was going to give me this is what I hadn't told you so far. And once you get this, you're going to be neat and organized. Like I thought that was what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then, uh, and because I was writing about my everyday, what I was doing, part of that is my faith. It's church, it's um, being in scripture, going to Bible study, all that kind of stuff. So I never hid anything about that. But the more that I wrote, and as I was in scripture at the same time, the year that I kind of made it a business, I guess you could say, was the year my daughter went to kindergarten.
Hmm.
She's 15, almost 16 now. And I've been doing it for 2 years before that, saying I'm not turning this into a business until she goes to kindergarten. But then I did. And so it's kind of like, okay, now it's time to get serious. Okay, God, and at that point it was 2 years in, I had started to realize, yeah, this is not a quick solution. This is more like a lifetime of struggle. And I was also starting to get, a decent sized audience. And I mean, it wasn't huge or anything, but it was, like actual people were following. And anyway, and I went to a women of faith thing that they don't do those anymore, but this was years ago. And I actually got free tickets because I was a blogger. And it was like, woohoo, well, then I had to
Yeah.
write about it, like that was part of it. And I was all excited that I got free tickets. So I wrote and so I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to women of faith. I got these free tickets. I'm supposed to write about it on the blog. I'm going to write about something spiritual. So what's God going to show me spiritual about cleaning in this? And yet the thing that he just hammered into me was authenticity. It was not, you should be better at cleaning. It was, you need to be more authentic. And I had been completely honest as my fake personality, as this noni, which is short for anonymous. I was still writing anonymously at that point. And it was like, no, actually and I was starting to realize this is the thing he had for me. And it was like, oh, what he's showing me more is that I need to be open in my real life about this struggle, as opposed to even so much talk more about my faith on the site. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure.
I don't know if it makes sense or not. Anyway, and in my mind, I was going, what was his question again? Because I'm just starting to talk about random stuff. Anyway.
Hey, this is what we're here for, just in case you're this is why people listen to podcasts, is random thoughts. I love it.
Yeah, random thoughts is that's my forte right there. No, so he, and that same year in my Bible study, I was studying the Acts of the Apostles, which also included Paul's letters to the churches.
Yeah.
And First Corinthians is like my life book, and what it is, he's over and over. He's like, here's this unique situation. He's like, well, so there's this and there's this, but it all comes down to love, and it all comes down to your heart, and then it's another situation, like nitpicky situation that people are like, what about this, Paul? And he's like, okay, well, there's this that's true and this that's true. But it really comes down to love. Like, it all comes down to your heart. And I think my husband heard me say 1,000 times that year, it's like, but it's a heart issue. It's a heart issue. And that's what he was just getting down. God was getting into me, was that it's your heart. And it was never about the cleaning. It was always about your heart for people, your heart for me, but that doesn't always, see, I could get off on this subject, but I'm not saying, oh, get your heart right and then your house will be clean. No, it's what he was telling me was, I had been thinking all this time, I was like, well, God can't use the bad parts of me. You know what I mean? Like, this is the bad part of me. This is the thing I'm not good at. God wants me to be perfect and then give him that. And, when it's, this might be in 2 Corinthians, you probably know. Anyway, but where it talks about the jars of clay, and my weakness. When Paul talks about that, he's like, I begged God to take this thorn away from me. And God said, no, because there is purpose in your weakness, because that's where my glory shines through. He's like, we're jars of clay. We are supposed to be weak. The cracks are valuable because that's how people see the light that's inside. If everything is opaque, if everything is like, shiny and covered up and there are no cracks, then people don't see that light that's inside of me. And it was like, God was just like, no, I created you this way. I gave you the brain that you have. I gave you the struggles that you have, because that's what I want you to give me. I want you to give me the worst of you. So anyway, I'm preaching here, but
I love it. I'm here for all of it.
In 2015, I think it was, I wrote an ebook that I just still offer it for free, called Giving God the Worst of Me, because I started to, I also saw a lot of the issues with, women having real struggles in their spiritual lives because they felt less than, because they felt broken, because it's like, wait a minute, Christian women are supposed to be great at keeping their house. And it's like, this is like, I can't do it. I mean, like, and that was me. And so it was like, maybe, and it's that, am I not believing enough? Do I not have enough faith? Is that why this is such a struggle? And I'm like, somebody needs to be here. And that's me, to say, no, it's okay that your brain works the way it does. That doesn't mean we go, oh, well, it's just the way I am. I'm just, no, but you don't need to keep on trying to do things the way other people do it. You just need to find out what works for you. And that's what I had to do. And that's what I write about. So it's like I keeping separate the cleaning issue and not making cleaning a spiritual issue. That's actually a big part of my platform, but I wanted to share the spiritual side of things, which is why I did that ebook. So that anybody who wants to know has it.
Hey friends, just pausing this conversation with Dana to remind you about the Spirit and Truth Conference. That's right, March 17th through the 19th here in Dayton, Ohio, Spirit and Truth is putting on a conference that's going to feel more like a camp meeting. It's going to fill your cup. It's going to give you an opportunity to connect with like-minded Christians as we do our very best to follow Christ together. I think you're absolutely going to love the conference. You're going to love hearing from speakers like Matt Reynolds, Kevin Watson, Maggie Ulmer, and so many more. Now is the best time to register. Go to spiritandtruth.life conference. Check that out. You're going to love it. We have a registration code for you at checkout. Put in reclamation into the promo code. You'll save $20 on registration. And more than anything, I think you're going to absolutely love this experience. And hey, I'll be there too. I'd love to say hi to you. Now, let's continue on with our conversation with Dana.
I think that makes a lot of sense. You're living in the tension of a both and, right? Like I'm messy and I'm Christian and I love Jesus and I want to do better. And all of that is okay to exist together in one very complex human, right? I mean, I'm complex. You're probably complex too, but like, you know what I mean? Like that resonates deeply. So this next piece of writing, as you step out a little bit more boldly in your faith, how are you? How are the feelings behind all that?
Scared to death. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how much we want to talk about this. So are we supposed to be talking about organizing for the rest of us? No.
We'll get to it when we get to it. I got nothing but time.
So, I mean, I'll just tell you, I started writing it in 2019. I had my really bad rough draft finished like March 7th of 2020, which we all now know the significance of that date,
Yeah.
And I felt like God was like, yeah, because I had my schedule, because I may be messy, but I am crazy, like driven and organized on certain things, like, that kind of stuff. So, which is how I'm able to write books. But, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to take off until after spring break, and then I'm going to polish this and have it ready, by May. And God was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And I was like, that's weird. Why is he, what? And I thought, well, maybe it's because, my oldest kid was graduating. And so maybe I'm going to need to, take a break from it or something. That was a very quiet sneeze.
Thank you.
I'm very impressed.
I do my best.
So anyway, I was like, but then 2020 happened, like the world changed. And, one of the things I really focus in on is when Jesus freaked out on the Pharisees when they made a big deal about his disciples not washing their hands.
Yeah.
Like that's actually one of his first, like, full on dressing down of people was like, and when I read that, I was like, how did I not see this before? I've read all these books before, but when I was just like, and here we went into COVID where everybody was like, wash your hands. And I was like, is this going to hold up? So then in the fall of last year, I went back to it, trying to get it ready to go. And I was like, yeah, it holds up because it's still true. Like he wasn't saying it's not a good thing to wash your hands.
Yeah.
He was just saying, don't make that a spiritual issue.
Yeah.
And there's that thing. Well, then I'm sorry. Well, then, okay, I don't know how much we want to get into this, but one of the other things, I'm just going to be real honest, is that I talk about in that I'm going to talk about that book is why have we been led to believe that cleanliness is next to godliness? I mean, we all know that that really isn't in the Bible, right? I mean, you've heard
Right.
that list
Yeah,
in
of
the list of
course.
things. And when I looked it up, I was like, well, I'm hoping it's Shakespeare that said it. Because if it's Shakespeare that said it, then I can just be like, it was Shakespeare. Okay. But it wasn't. It was actually, I think it was John Wesley. So like somebody who's a spiritual father to a lot of us, you know what I mean? And it's like, wait, why has this, because a lot of people just they don't like to talk about this, or they don't talk about it, or they don't think it's
Sure.
necessary to talk about. They don't understand that there are people who are like, obviously, if cleanliness is next to godliness, I am going to hell. I mean, like, I know that it's
Right.
a little
No, that's right.
dramatic, but
That's
it's the
cultural.
way
It's cultural theology at its best. It's cultural
it
theology.
is. And but then I was like, why have people not debunked this? And
Mm,
I'm sorry, but I think it's because people are afraid that if they explain that cleanliness is not next to godliness, that they're afraid people are going to think it's okay not to clean. Well, then we get into some patriarchy issues. I'm sorry. But I mean, like, because who is it that does most of the cleaning? Well, anyway, I don't know if I want this
sure.
in there or not, but
I no.
you
Li-
decide how your
well,
audience would respond to this
well,
because
listen. This is good stuff because I think this is practical good stuff about the way that we look at our faith and whether or not people agree or disagree with what you're saying. The reality is, if we don't take the time to honor the thought, then then we have to ask the question, what's the barrier in my life that doesn't let me honor it? Well, and the patriarchal connection is really important because that's how cultural theology is developed. It's by the people who pass it down from generation to generation, and more often than not, in theological circles, of which I'm a part of many, it's mostly guys who look and talk like me, right? So middle-aged white men, right? Like that's just the reality of the situation. So I'm
so
here
that's
for
why I'm
all of it.
scared. That's
Yeah,
why I'm scared. I'm like, do I really want to be the person talking about that? Am I qualified to talk about that? Do I really want to go there? Because the more I look at this stuff, the more I realize, oh, okay, well there's a lot farther reaching implications than just but
all
at
of
the
it.
same
Yeah.
time, it comes down to discipleship because it's
Hmm.
not a soundbite answer. And Jesus was not a soundbite guy. I
Right.
mean, like, you need to read all of his words, all of them, to really understand. But if you take one teeny tiny thing, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to live my life by this, 5-word sentence. Well, then you're missing a whole lot of stuff. And so it really just comes down to that discipleship and how it's hard. It's hard to have these conversations. It's hard to be the one to talk about this stuff and to say, yeah, you do need to do your dishes. I mean, that's what I do for a living is I tell people to do their dishes. But I also want you to be clear that Jesus doesn't love you any less if you do them and if you don't do them.
Or any more for that matter, right? It's not
No,
either way. You're not
yes,
going to earn a deeper level of
yes,
affection based
yes.
off of based off of a task. And I grew up Catholic, where there's a cultural theology that's not even true about this idea about earning your way into places closer to God in heaven. Like it's just not there. And so I think I this is what I know for sure is that my audience loves to pray. And so I'm just going to ask all of them as they're listening to this conversation to pray for Dana and for this next piece of writing, because I think it's going to be really important for a lot of people. And so we can definitely commit to that.
Thank you.
I do want to have you back on when the book comes out. This is
Let's
not
do
the book
it.
that we were meant.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Good.
It's not even under contract. It's not done. I haven't looked at it since I haven't looked at it in a year. And that's where I'm like, okay, so how's this gonna go? Because I've been wrestling
Well,
with
let's
some
set a
things
date.
myself.
Let's set a date. When do we want this book out by? Come on.
When does God want this book out? That's the thing. That's my thing is I'm like, is it God that's making this take longer, or is it me dragging my feet? Is it, whew, I don't know.
I feel the stress for you. I'm actually sweating a little bit. That's how I know it's good.
Yeah. Anyway,
uh,
yeah. Yeah. So
I do
please
want to
just
get
know
into
if
some.
if
Yeah, go
anybody
ahead.
is like, I can't believe she said the word patriarchy and now we're going to hate her. Just know I'm struggling with this as much as anybody. Like I'm struggling with that whole, I don't want to talk about it, but I think it's
So
there.
this is one of the things that my therapist says all the time,
Mhm.
and I'll share it with you and our audience, is that anytime your emotional temperature spikes above a 6, so if the word patriarchy spikes you above a 6, it's always more about you than it is the other person. So on a scale from 1 to 10, if you get emotionally triggered above a 6, just know that it's always about you before it's about the other person. So if you're above a 6 because of something that you heard Dana say, and what was a very docile conversation about cultural theology, then I want to invite you to spend some time with God talking about that. And if you want further dialogue, you can email me, and I'd love to talk about theology, tony@twmilt.com, and we can wrestle through it together. I promise I don't have any answers, just a lot of questions.
Yeah, don't email me about it. I'm not ready for that.
No, she's not ready. She's not ready.
Yeah, wait and see if I keep that in the book or not. Yeah, then we'll talk about it if I do keep it in the book. So
And so speaking of books, I did, so this book is coming out January 11th. And the podcast that we're recording now in December will come out around that same time period. People are heading into the new year. What are your top 3 to 5 go-to strategies for those New Year's resolutions about, okay, I'm going to get my house finally in order? Or after our conversation, I feel like we should just throw it out the window, right? Like just how do I live in a mess today that helps me be productive tomorrow?
okay, so New Year's energy is real. It's also very fleeting. We all know that, right? That's why
Praise the Lord.
it's
Yeah.
the same one every year, right? So my biggest advice on that is to do things in a way where you are guaranteed progress, which my whole decluttering process is all about guaranteed progress. So the number one thing that's different about me and every other person who talks about this kind of stuff is I do not pull everything out of a space to get started decluttering it. Okay. Because that's a recipe for disaster for anybody like me. Because I used to do that. Because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. I would pull everything out of a cabinet that was, cluttered and piled with stuff. And then I would be like, oh, okay, I'll just put back the things that I want to keep. Well, the problem with that is that I get distracted. Life happens. And now all that stuff that used to be shoved inside of a cabinet is now outside of the cabinet on the floor or the countertop or whatever. And the mess is worse than it was before. And so that's where you get really discouraged and you're like, what was the point? Because then you end up having to shove everything back in there, and where you kind of knew where it was shoved before, now it's all one big mess, So, so yeah, that is, the biggest no-no is to do that. So instead, what I do is I do step by step. I have a 5-step process that deals with each individual item as you pull it out. You make a final decision and you act on that final decision. So like the first step is trash. Literally just look for the trash, because you're going to get stuff out. You're going to start to see what's in there, and you're going to reduce the overall volume of the mess. The second one is easy stuff. Anything that has an established home somewhere else in your house, it's just not there for whatever reason. We're not going to go, why is it not there? We're just going to go take it there. Okay. So you pull those things out, the mess is overall reduced. It's just every time the volume of the mess shrinks, the volume of your feeling of being overwhelmed will also shrink. Okay.
Oh, that's good work.
So, and if you step away at any point, it's better than it was before. It's not done, but it's better. Okay. And doing that is huge. Okay. Because then you start to go, oh, it's worth my time to take 5 minutes to just look in this space and pull out any trash and throw it away. Then you look for donations, anything that you don't have to really think about. You just stick it in your donate box. And then, the next is my decluttering questions, which, help you determine where something goes in your home. Where would I look for it first? And then with each individual item that you pull out, you take it there now. That right there is the key. And it can feel like, no, I'm different this year. This year's different. I really do mean it. I'm going to be organized forever. Okay, great. You're still going to get there using this method. But with this method, if you happen to fizzle, I'm sure whoever's listening, I'm sure it's not you. It's the other listeners that I'm talking to who will probably
absolutely,
fizzle.
100%.
Yeah, but you personally who are hearing, I'm not talking about you. I'm just like all those other people. So those other people who are going to fizzle if they will do acting on each item individually as it comes out of the space. When they fizzle at any point, their house is better off. So when the fizzle happens, you're not in this bad situation of, oh my goodness, I've messed up my house worse than ever, whatever. Instead, you are just like, oh, okay, it's better. The stuff is gone. It's out. It's all in its home. So anyway, that right there. The other thing, as far as if you're looking for habits, which habits are everything, decluttering is everything as well, but habits are also everything. Sorry. But if you're looking for habits, do your dishes every day. And there are people listening who are like, are there people who don't know to do that? Yeah, there's a lot of people who put them off. I mean, just, because dishes math is a thing. Dishes math is that 1 day's worth of dishes takes like 10, 15 minutes. 2 days worth of dishes does not take double that amount of time, even though logically I thought it would. It takes an hour because now you're having to shift and rearrange and, whatever, get the water out and get clean water, all that kind of stuff. 3 days worth of dishes is like a whole kitchen excavation, 5 hours. Well, my problem was I didn't realize that. And so I thought doing the dishes took hours, because I always just would wait until I was out of dishes. I would be like, oh, well, 1 day's worth of dishes doesn't look like enough to be worth my time. I should wait until I actually have enough that it's worth my time. Well, 2 days worth of dishes. Oh, I don't have time to do all that. 3 days worth of dishes. Oh my goodness. I'm like washing, we're drinking out of measuring cups, that kind of thing. So it's like, that just reality. I thought doing the dishes was a 5-hour task. And so I just did math and thought, okay, well, doing the dishes every day then would be like what? An hour and a half? I don't have an hour and a half every day to do dishes. But only after I did the dishes every single day was I like, oh, 1 day's worth of dishes takes like 10 minutes. And realizing that is huge. And if your house is out of control, the thing to do first is your dishes. Every single day, the thing to do first is your dishes. When you're overwhelmed, you don't have time to do a whole lot of stuff, do your dishes. And it really does have an impact on the entire house.
No, I love that. I think it makes sense. And I love the idea of habits. It reminds me of that graduation speech that the one admiral gave about making your bed every day. Like that's just a place to start where you can knock a task off.
Can I talk about that for a second?
Yes, please.
I just want to say making your bed is awesome. I won't show you mine. It's actually right over there, but it's not made. But the reason, because I had heard that before, I was like, making your bed was okay. And I'm like, okay, well, because I was so completely overwhelmed in my home, I was like, okay, you can tell me to make my bed, and that is great. And it really does have a positive impact on my psyche and everything when I do make my bed. However, I had been living at the time, 35 years of my life, knowing for a fact that at the end of the day, if your bed is not made, you can still go to bed.
Yeah, amen.
But the thing I had to realize was, but doing the dishes, if my dishes are not done, it really grinds the entire house to a halt because we can't cook. We don't have anything to eat off of. We don't have any space on the counters. We have to wash a pot before we actually cook. Not doing the dishes is a big problem. So anyway, doing the dishes does grind everything to a halt. So it's like I was the person who needed to know, what actually really has to be done? Like what actually moves the needle? So making your bed is awesome. But if in your mind you're like, I don't really have to do that. I am telling you, you do have to do the dishes. Do you see where I was coming from now?
Yeah, no, I actually like it because it puts into some productivity ideas and that sort of thing. So I would be remiss, since I have the expert here, if I didn't ask a semi-personal question that may or may not have a huge impact on my marriage. So, my wife and I will celebrate 19 years of marriage in February. Thank you. She's everything to me. She's wonderful. I have a problem about putting my clothes away. My wife washes the clothes and she folds the clothes because she's amazing. And my kids help fold the clothes or they wad them up nicely. And when you have something in your head that's like, I really need to put my clothes away, but I absolutely hate the task more than anything in my life, especially when I know that I'm just going to wear the clothes again but yet it's having an adverse effect on my marriage because and we've actually talked about this, and when I do marriage counseling stuff, I talk about this because it clearly feels like I'm disrespecting or not honoring her work, that she doesn't feel valued when I don't put my clothes away. Do you have any, can you help me
I
want
do.
to put my clothes away?
Want to? No. But I can, like I had to give up on the someday this is going to be different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm going to be, I just need to be different. Let's go with how you actually are. Okay. Here's the thing here's my guess is that it doesn't occur to you to put your clothes away until she's already mad. Is that right?
Right. That's correct.
Okay.
I don't
So,
even
so I,
actually, I don't even really think about it because I'm just
right.
I wear the same clothes every week. It's
Yeah.
the same 5
Right.
outfits basically.
So you've thought about it in after the fact.
Yeah,
But the problem is that you don't ever think about it before the fact, right?
that's true. Yep,
Okay.
100%.
So that is the story of my life. Like I have what I call slob vision. Like I just don't notice things. Like, people are like, well, just don't put your keys down on random places. And I'm like, you think I realize they're leaving my hand? Like I literally they're like, oh, just always do this. And I'm like, that's a nice thought. Anyway, so, what I have to do, there is a lot of magic in what I call the 5-minute pickup. Okay. And you can kind of adjust it for whatever your situation is. But just to
Yeah.
say, okay, because these things don't just naturally occur to me to do in the moment, that doesn't mean that I go, oh, well, then I'm just not going to do it. Oh, well, I'd never. Instead, I say, okay, if I take a 5 minutes of focus and say every day, at some point, I don't assign a time of day because then if I miss it, I'm like, oh, well, I'll have to do that tomorrow. Instead, I'm like, whenever it occurs to me that I need to, I call them awkward pauses. I've got 5 minutes. Say, I'm going to do a 5-minute pickup. And during that 5 minutes of focus, you put your clothes away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so maybe
Sure.
they weren't immediately put away, but they are put away. And so it like takes me like a 5 minutes of I'm going to do the thing. So for me, it would be like, the water glasses. My husband feels like we live in, what was it? The Alien movie with Mel Gibson, Signs. Yeah. He thinks that
Yeah.
that plus cabinet doors open all the time. He's like, it's like M. Night Shyamalan used you as his reference for all his movies. Anyway, but I'm like, I don't notice that they're there. But when I have 5 minutes of focus, when I have a 5-minute pickup, I'm like, oh, okay, well now I see them and I go and I do that. And my house is better off than me just going, why don't I do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. That's really good. So many helpful things here. So many valuable insights. We really did cover the gamut today. I know that my listeners are going to want to follow you and continue to pray for you. Where's the best place on the interwebs to get connected to you and your platform?
You can just go to aslobcomesclean.com. That is my home base for all the different things that I do.
And you've got a podcast and a blog, and it looks like some online courses. If people really want to get into the thick of it as the new year's approaches,
Yes.
And you done a really good job on your website about, hey, if you're not sure where to start with this one blog where you kind of break it all down. I think that's very, very well written and beautifully done on your part. So kudos.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so the last question I always love to ask people, it's an advice question, except I ask you to go back and give yourself one piece of advice, and I get to name the day and time. And so I'd like to take you to the day after you publish your very first blog on A Slob Comes Clean. If you could go back and look at that younger version of Dana and just kind of grab her by the face, look her in the eyes, and give her one piece of wisdom, now 12 years later, what's the one thing you're telling her?
That's a good question. The word that comes to mind is relax. Like, I think I probably said it multiple times in those early years, especially, but like, I felt like I was hanging on by my fingernails,
Yeah.
Okay, so I did the dishes and I picked things up today, but I was waiting to fail because I had failed so many times, at trying to get my house under control. And what I know now is that if you fail, okay, just do the dishes again and
Yeah.
pick up again. It's there. This isn't a project. This is, your house is not a project. It's just day after day. And the more you do it, the easier it's going to be. The more you get stuff out, the easier it's going to be. But I think it's just relax and know that you are going to mess up, but that doesn't mean you failed.
I love it. I love it. You are going to mess up, but it doesn't mean you fail. That's a good word for all of us, I think. Dana, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Thank you for your openness, your vulnerability, and your authenticity. It really does mean the world. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed this.
Man, what I appreciate about Dana's work, her ministry, is how practical and just realistic she is. This is not one of those kind of self-help gurus that doesn't know what life is really like. So when you go to her website or you listen to her podcast, you'll find the most practical applications on how to get organized and focused on this next season of life. And I don't know about you, but it's never hurt me to get focused on the next season. So thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Thank you. Do me a favor, go follow Dana on socials. Let her know that you heard her here on the podcast. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave a rating and review on iTunes or Spotify. And be sure to share this episode with a friend. It is by far the best compliment you can give us. Thank you guys so much for helping me be a part of this platform and have the opportunity to do this work. And remember, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.